Part 15. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 141. On the way to the criminal department, Xiao Jinyan saw Xiao Yongxuan coming towards him. There was obvious joy in his eyebrows. He smiled and said hello when he saw him. "Where is the prince going?" Xiao Jinyan's voice was cold and distant. "I am going to the Ministry of Punishment." "Where are you going, brother?" "I am about to go to the Imperial Study." Xiao Yongxuan was about to leave when he asked with a smile, "Prince, how is the investigation of the poisoning case going?" Xiao Jinyan said, "It's rare to see my elder brother care so much about me investigating the case. I am also concerned about the prince. If we don't get to the bottom of it, the prince may not be able to sleep well at night." Xiao Yongxuan deliberately emphasized the last sentence. Xiao Jinyan said coldly, "Brother, don't worry, I will definitely get to the bottom of this." At this time, Wei Qi quickly ran over, leaned into Xiao Jinyan's ear and said, "Your Highness, the criminal Chiu Kuei committed suicide by taking poison." Xiao Jinyan opened his eyes wide. "What did you say?" Wei Qi raised his voice and repeated, "The criminal Okra committed suicide by taking poison." Wei Kai's voice was not loud, but not too quiet. Xiao Yongxuan happened to hear it. An unnoticeable sneer flashed in his eyes. "Check it out. It's a waste of time after all." Xiao Jinyan's eyes changed. "Where did she get the poison? Take me to see her quickly." After Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he strode towards the criminal department, but was stopped by Xiao Yongxuan. "Prince, what happened to make you so anxious?" Xiao Jinyan calmly replied, "It's just a small matter, I have to deal with it now." Xiao Yongxuan asked knowingly, "Really? Has the case come to an end?" "You'll know when I get there," Xiao Jinyan said coldly before striding away. Xiao Yongxuan looked at Xiao Jinyan's leaving figure and snorted, "You will never find out in your life." When Xiao Jinyan rushed to the dungeon, he saw a body lying on the ground covered with a white cloth. "Are you ready?" Wei Qi lowered his eyebrows and nodded, "Back to your highness, I'm ready." Xiao Jinyan ordered, "Let the news out." Yes. Wei Qi turned and left. Xiao Yongxuan came back from the imperial study and heard the conversation between the two young eunuchs on the way. "A miraculous doctor is a miraculous doctor. He can survive with just one prescription. Isn't that right? I heard that Shen Liangdi was also poisoned. I don't know where the miracle doctor His Highness invited saved her." Xiao Yongxuan's expression changed when he heard this. He was actually saved. He suddenly thought that Shen Liangdi drank poison and should have been killed on the spot, but she survived well. The same was true for the last autumn hunt. Xiao Jinyan actually has such a powerful miracle doctor by his side? Can you bring the dead back to life? By the way, I heard that His Highness took the prisoner to the East Palace. Xiao Yongxuan heard the specific address and strode away with a gloomy expression. Shen Chuwei slept until noon. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and glanced at the bed. Xiao Jinyan was no longer around. She sat up slowly and saw a delicate purse and a small note on the pillow next to her. She picked it up curiously and found that it was quite heavy. She first glanced at the note, which said, "New Year's money." Shen Chuwei couldn't help laughing after reading it. Xiao Jinyan actually remembered to give her lucky money. I didn't notice it. She looked at the purse again and looked at it carefully. The purse was embroidered with a beautiful pattern in the shape of a rabbit. She tore the knot open and poured out the contents, discovering 6 gold bars. Xiao Jinyan is so generous. The New Year's gift is actually 6 gold bars. Chengzi heard laughter at the door, opened the door and walked in. She lifted the bed skirt and saw her little master looking happy. "Little master, why are you so happy?" Shen Chu raised the 6 gold bars in his hand as if he were offering a treasure. "Look, the New Year's money given to me by His Highness." "Your Highness is so kind to my little master." Chengzi's eyes widened when she saw the 6 gold bars. Shen Shuwei stared at the 6 gold bars for a while, which was enough for her to eat and drink for a long time. She suggested that she should continue to give away gold bars. My young master, when His Highness left today, he also gave Xiun Pavilion a silver reward, 12 taels per person, which is equivalent to 3 months' monthly payment, Chun 11 said happily. When Shen Shuwei heard this, his eyes showed admiration. I just like Xiao Jinyan's domineering style. Chengzi asked curiously, my lord, what is the overbearing president fan? Shen Shuwei explained in layman's terms, he is handsome, rich, and generous. Chengzi said with a smile, I understand, I like it too. Shen Chu smiled and said, who doesn't like a domineering president? Chengzi asked curiously, my lord, what are you going to give to His Highness? Should I give it away too? Shen Shuwei looked confused. She thought she was the youngest and didn't need to give it away. Chengzi looked serious, little master, there are so many women in your highness, why don't you give me some gifts to express your gratitude? No wonder Chengzi would think so. In ancient times, it was normal for men to have 3 wives and 4 concubines, not to mention that it was more normal for princes to have many women. A man who matches so many women is like a wolf with more meat and less meat. Women have to fight to grab it. The one who doesn't grab it will definitely not get the meat. It's a pity that she comes from modern times. Let me see. Shen Shuwei thought of a stone in the space. It looked very good and would be a good necklace. With this thought in mind, she put her hand under the pillow and actually used her mind to take out the stone in the space. She clenched the stone in her hand and held it out for Chengzi to see, give this to your highness. Chengzi looked at it carefully for a few times, my lady, what is this made of? It looks beautiful. Shen Chu smiled and said, stone, it will glow at night. Chengzi, my lady, His Highness gave you 6 gold bars as New Year's money, how can you give a stone? Shen Chu said slightly, the gift is small but the sentiment is great. His Highness doesn't like fancy things. But Chengzi looked at the stone in the lady's hand and felt it was shabby no matter how he looked at it. When night fell, 3 black figures quickly sneaked into the East Palace, into the side room on the north side. With a squeak, the door was cut open by a knife, and 3 black figures rushed into the side room, their sight fell on the bed. There was no light in the room, and only by the moonlight outside the window, could one vaguely see the bulging quilt on the bed, with a person lying inside. One of them held the knife tightly in his hand and waved it at the person on the bed without hesitation. When the knife fell, there was no sound of blood and flesh. At this moment, dozens of people rushed in from the door, and the lights in the room suddenly lit up. The 3 men in black realized that they had been deceived, and began to wave their knives and rush out. The guards who came in were all skilled in martial arts. After a few moves, they were defeated. Xiao Jinyan walked in and looked at one of the figures. He was tall and straight, with a black scarf on his cheek, revealing only a pair of dark eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes, brother, don't struggle in vain, you can't escape tonight. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 142. Xiao Yongxuan was shocked. He didn't expect that Xiao Jinyan would recognize him even though he was disguised so perfectly. He glanced at the bed and saw clearly 2 pillows under the quilt. It seems that Chiu Kui's death is true, but Xiao Jinyan set up a trap to trick him. Now that Chiu Kui is dead, Xiao Jinyan can do nothing to him as long as he doesn't admit it. He suddenly pulled off his turban, revealing his true appearance, and grinned twice, Prince, your East Palace guards are too lax. I just want to test it. The prince still needs to take good precautions. Xiao Jinyan looked at the shameless Xiao Yongxuan and sneered, brother, you broke into the East Palace at night and wanted to kill people and silence them. Do you still want to deny it? Xiao Yongxuan asked knowingly, what does the prince mean? I don't understand. Xiao Jinyan said slowly, Brother went to the wrong room. Chiu Kuei is in the next room, and she has already confessed. Xiao Yongxuan's expression changed. Was Kyokui really saved? This is impossible. Impossible. Xiao Yongxuan continued to deny, Prince, I don't understand what you are talking about. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. You should explain it to your father. After Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he took 2 steps back. Xiao Yongxuan had a bad feeling. He looked in the direction of the door and saw his father in dragon robe slowly walking in. He was stunned on the spot. The emperor's sharp eyes looked directly at Xiao Yongxuan coldly, and his voice was cold and stern. Prince Qian, what are your intentions when you break into the East Palace during the night shift? Xiao Yongxuan knelt down on the ground with a frightened sound, and kowtowed, Father, I have been wronged, and I have been wronged. Xiao Jinyan, I didn't expect you to be so scheming, and I was deceived by you. Now the only way is to refuse to admit it. Maybe there is still a glimmer of hope. The emperor shouted angrily, you still dare to quibble? You broke into the East Palace at night wearing night clothes and holding a sword. Do you think I am a fool? Father, son and minister are just. Before Xiao Yongxuan finished speaking, he was coldly interrupted by the emperor, I have said that I hate brothers killing each other the most. You actually dare to poison the prince and turn a deaf ear to my words. I don't have a son like you. Xiao Yongxuan trembled in fear, and he looked at Xiao Jinyan hurriedly, Prince, please tell your father clearly that I did not poison you. This is all a misunderstanding. Chiu Kuei slowly walked in from the outside. She looked at Prince Qian who was kneeling on the ground, with overwhelming hatred in her eyes. Prince Qian, I was deceived by you into poisoning the prince. I agreed to take you as your concubine. I didn't expect that I did it, but you asked someone to poison me to death. If His Highness hadn't taken advantage of your plan, I would have died long ago. After Chiu Kuei finished speaking, she knelt down and kowtowed to the emperor, Your Majesty, this slave was ordered by Prince Qian to poison His Highness the Crown Prince. Every word of the slave is true and there is absolutely no deception. When Xiao Yongxuan saw Kyokui appearing in front of him alive, he was completely stunned. He was actually tricked by Xiao Jinyan. Hateful. The emperor said coldly, Prince Qian, now that witnesses and evidence are gathered together, what else do you have to say? Xiao Yongxuan's face turned pale. He climbed forward a few steps, grabbed the emperor's clothes, and begged for mercy, Father, I was wrong. I beg your father to have mercy. I beg your father to have mercy. The emperor coldly ordered, Come here, lock Prince Qian into the sex mansion. No one is allowed to take a single step without my order. 2 imperial guards walked in together, pressed Xiao Yongxuan on the ground, and walked out. Father, I realize that I was wrong, please forgive me. As the imperial guards walked away, Xiao Yongxuan's shouts gradually became weaker. The emperor's face was gloomy. When he looked at Xiao Jinyan, he calmed down a little and asked, How is Shen Liangdi's health? Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, Back to my father, after being diagnosed and treated by the imperial doctor, he is now fine. The emperor nodded, That's good. If it weren't for Shen Liangdi, the consequences would be disastrous. After the emperor left, Xiao Jinyan knew that his father was reluctant to commit murder because he was worried about Xiao Yongxuan being his son. But if Xiao Yongxuan is not eliminated, it will be a disaster in the future. At midnight, Xiao Jinyan returned to the palace and passed the intersection. He looked in the direction of Xiun Pavilion, thought for a while, and walked over. Xiun Pavilion was quiet, everyone else had fallen asleep, only the little rabbit and Chengzi who were keeping watch were still awake. Chengzi was dozing off. When she heard footsteps, she woke up instantly. She raised her head and saw a slender figure, opening the door curtain and walking in. She hurriedly got up and said, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan said calmly, Prepare hot water, I want to take a bath. Yes, Chengzi trotted out. The hot water will be ready in a short while. Chengzi took 2 steps forward and asked respectfully, Your Highness, I will undress you. Xiao Jinyan refused coldly, No, just step back. Here Chengzi responded, then exited. Xiao Jinyan undressed and took off his belt, then stepped into the tub. The warm water wraps around the body, relieving the fatigue of the day. He hasn't closed his eyes for a moment since last night. Now that Xiao Yongxuan's matter has been solved, one of his worries has been solved. The stone in his heart has temporarily fallen away, and he feels a lot more relaxed. He washed his body and touched the scar on his chest with his hand. Normally he didn't feel anything, but when he touched it, he felt a heartbreaking pain. He held his chest and waited until the pain disappeared before continuing to clean himself. After taking a shower, Xiao Jinyan wiped his body with a dry towel, then slowly put on his clothes and walked out from behind the screen. There were only 4 lights left in the room, and the lighting was very dim. Xiao Jinyan slowly came to the bedside, raised his hand to lift the bedside skirt, looked at the bed, and saw Shen Shuwei sleeping with the quilt in her arms. He put down the bedside, slowly sat on the edge of the bed, lifted the corner of the quilt, put on the bed with slippers, and looked down at Shen Shuwei holding the quilt. He couldn't cover himself with the quilt without pulling it out. The temperature is extremely low at night in winter. Even if the house is burning red charcoal, it is still very cold. Xiao Jinyan stretched out his hand and pulled the quilt in her arms. It was okay if he didn't pull it. When he pulled it, she turned to her side and held more quilts in her arms. Xiao Jinyan had no choice but to wake her up. Xiaju, how can you let me sleep like this? Shen Chu was in a deep sleep, and Xiao Jinyan's low volume had no effect at all. Xiao Jinyan had no choice but to call again, Xiaju. Shen Chu was half asleep. When she heard Xiaoju, she thought she was dreaming again. She muttered dissatisfiedly, What are you doing? You always call me in your dreams. Xiao Jinyan's hand touched her sensual little face, and his eyes fell on the pink lips, thinking of the barely tasted kiss last night, the soft touch, mixed with the fragrance of peach blossoms and tea. It seemed to be right on his lips at this moment, making him want to taste it again. Shen Shuwei felt a caterpillar crawling around on his cheek, itching a little, and finally crawled to his mouth. She impatiently stretched out her hand and tried to swat the caterpillar away. However, the caterpillar failed to swat it away and was held tightly by a big hand, causing her to wake up instantly. Good evening, my dears. Acting like a coquettish girl, please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today I updated 4 chapters and 8,000 words. Tomorrow I'll probably update chapter 5 or 6, looking like he's in his early 10,000s. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 143. Shen Chu opened his eyes slightly and saw Xiao Jinyan sitting on the bed, looking down at him. Someone suddenly appeared on the bed, and she was stunned for a moment. Then he saw the hand holding him, and their hands seemed to be held together. Xiao Jinyan paused and then let go of her hand. Your Highness, when did you come? She slept late tonight, probably after 11 o'clock, and she didn't hear Xiao Jinyan say that she was coming at that time. Xiao Jinyan said, not long after we arrived, the mastermind behind the scenes has already been caught. Shen Shuwei was a little excited when he heard the words and did not forget to blow a rainbow fart. Your Highness is so fast. It has only been a day and he has been caught. Then she asked curiously, Your Highness, who is it? Xiao Jinyan answered concisely and to the point, Prince Xian. Shen Chu sighed slightly, we are born from the same roots, why are we in such a hurry? Xiao Jinyan's eyes paused and he praised, "This poem is good." Shen Shuwei just said it casually. Judging from Xiao Jinyan's tone, he probably had never heard of this poem. "My concubine made it up casually." "I read that right, you are very smart." "Your Highness is overly complimentary." Xiao Jinyan said, "If he didn't kill me all the time, he wouldn't have ended up like this." Shen Chu slightly nodded in agreement. "I couldn't help but yawn." Xiao Jinyan saw it and said, "I woke you up." Shen Chu shook his head slightly to show that he was fine. "Do you want to sleep now, Your Highness?" Xiao Jinyan nodded, "Yeah." Shen Chuwei suddenly thought of the gift she had prepared, reached under the pillow, took out the small stone and handed it to Xiao Jinyan. "Your Highness, this is a New Year's gift for you." Xiao Jinyan couldn't remember how many years she hadn't received a New Year's gift. She was a little surprised that someone suddenly wanted to give her a gift. "Have you prepared any gifts?" Shen Chu said softly, "Your Highness gave me New Year's money, and I prepared New Year's gifts for Your Highness. It's a courtesy." Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the necklace in her hand. He picked it up and looked at it for a few times. The necklace was made of red rope, and the pendant was a beautiful piece. It didn't feel like gold or jade, but a bit like a stone. He raised his eyes and looked at Shen Chuwei. "Is this a stone?" Shen Chuwei admitted openly, "This is my concubine's favorite little stone. It will glow at night." Shen Chuwei was afraid that he wouldn't believe it, so she came over and held the small stone tightly with both hands, letting Xiao Jinyan see it. "Look." Xiao Jinyan saw the small stone in her hand glowing light green from between her fingers. "It does shine." Xiao Jinyan then asked, "Is it the same as the stone in the backyard?" Shen Chu shook his head slightly, "It's different. The stones in the yard absorb sunlight and emit light, while this stone emits light based on temperature." Xiao Jinyan was a little curious. "I have accepted your gift." Shen Chuwei made room for Xiao Jinyan and at the same time let go of the quilt in his arms. Xiao Jinyan lay down next to Shen Chuwei and covered herself with the quilt. The quilt was very warm and she could smell the faint fragrance of peach blossoms. The two were very close to each other and were used to it, so they were not as conflicted as they were the first time. Xiao Jinyan was really tired. When he closed his eyes, he felt sleepy. Shen Chuwei was woken up at first, but he could continue to sleep even if he closed his eyes. Next day. It was already bright when Xiao Jinyan woke up, and through the bedside, he could see the sunshine outside the window. He looked back at Shen Chuwei, who was sleeping on his right. She was sleeping soundly at this time, as if she had had a sweet dream, and the corners of her lips were slightly raised. Xiao Jinyan gets up before dawn every day. Even if today is the second day of the Lunar New Year, he still needs to get up early. After getting dressed, he saw the necklace beside the pillow, picked it up and put it in his sleeve pocket before leaving. Today is the second day of the Lunar New Year, and the New Year atmosphere is still very strong. Tao Chenjui came to visit early in the morning. Shen Chuwei prepared peanuts, melon seeds, chocolate, etc. to entertain Tao Chenjui. "Sister Shen, I heard that you ate poisonous crabs for His Highness. Are you feeling better? I wanted to take a look at you yesterday, but Your Highness said you needed to rest, so I didn't come." Shen Chuwei said calmly, "It's much better now." Tao Chenjui breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. The person who poisoned me is really hateful. Fortunately, it's okay." Concubine Su walked in with her slender waist twisted and a handkerchief swinging around. When she saw Tao Chenjui, she greeted warmly, "Tao Chenjui is here too." The two of them had an in-depth exchange of words because of the book given by Shen Chuwei, and their relationship became closer. Tao Chenjui smiled and said, "Concubine Su is here, come and eat melon seeds." After Concubine Su sat down, she looked at Shen Chuwei and asked worriedly, "Is Shen Liangdi okay?" Shen Chu cracked the melon seed slightly and said, "It's no longer serious, just eat the melon seeds." Concubine Su grabbed a handful of melon seeds and started eating them. No wonder His Highness loves Shen Liangdi so much. Shen Liangdi saved His Highness twice. If it were me, I would be tempted. Concubine Su always spoke straightforwardly, and Shen Chuwei and Tao Chenjui were already used to it. Shen Chu laughed slightly. It was an accident. Just hope your highness is fine. Tao Chenjui said with a smile, His Highness is not just a life-saving grace to Sister Shen. His Highness really likes Sister Shen. He stayed at Ziyun Pavilion on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Shen Chuwei looked surprised. How do you know? Concubine Su said, the entire East Palace knows about this, it's not a secret. Shen Chuwei was even more surprised. They actually knew that Xiao Jinyan could come to Ziyun Pavilion after midnight last night. What Shen Chuwei didn't know was that even in the middle of the night at Ziyun Pavilion, the entire East Palace knew about it the next day. Concubine Su nodded in agreement, that's right. If something happens to your highness, it will be the end for us sisters. They understand better than anyone else the principle of both prosperity and loss. The three of them chatted while cracking melon seeds. When Li Liangyuan came, she saw such a harmonious scene. She had been thinking a lot these past 2 days and felt that there was no point in currying favor with Chang Liangdi. His Highness went to Ziyun Pavilion every 3 days and never spent the night in Zinlan Palace. After thinking about it, I still came to curry favor with the big tree Shen Chuwei. She stepped forward and said, Concubine Su, Tao Chenjui is also here. Concubine Su looked up and saw that it was Li Liangyuan, and said angrily, why is Li Liangyuan here free? Aren't you going to accompany Chang Liangdi? I heard that Shen Liangdi was seriously ill, so I came over to take a look. Li Liangyuan looked at Shen Chuwei and said, is Shen Liangdi feeling better? Shen Chuwei said calmly, it's much better now. Li Liangyuan heard the coldness in Shen Chuwei's tone. She knew that building a good relationship did not happen overnight. Just like Concubine Su, didn't she not deal with Shen Chuwei at the beginning? Looking at it now, the relationship between the two is not bad. Li Liangyuan took the gift box from the maid's hand, opened it and showed it to Shen Chuwei. This is ginseng from Qinbei Mountain. I gave it to Shen Liangdi to replenish her health. Shen Liangdi, don't dislike it? This is ginseng that her parents bought at a high price, and she is reluctant to eat it herself. Good night. This is the first chapter, there are 5 chapters left. The young master has worked so hard, are you guys sure you don't want to encourage me by voting for monthly votes and recommendation votes? The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 144. When it comes to ginseng, Qinbei Mountain ginseng is the best. The ginseng in the palace also comes from Qinbei Mountain as tribute, and ginseng that is thousands of years old is the most rare. When they heard about Qinbei Mountain ginseng, Concubine Su and Tao Chenjui both looked over, wondering what kind of ginseng it was. In the brocade box in Li Liangyuan's hand, there is a ginseng that looks like a radish, which is longer than the woman's hand. Tao Chenjui was born a merchant and had been seen by many people from Qinbei Mountain. She smiled and asked, Li Liangyuan, this ginseng is good, but is it 100 years old? Although Tao Chenjui is 3 levels below her, he has a good relationship with Shen Liangdi and Concubine Su. Li Liangyuan also smiled and said, Tao Chenjui is so powerful. This ginseng is less than 100 years old. My father said it is 88 years old. Although a 100-year-old ginseng is rare, the 88-year-old ginseng is also rare. It is good for replenishing the body. Tao Chenjui looked at Shen Chuwei with a smile. Let Li Liangyuan spend money. Shen Chuwei looked at Chengzi and motioned for her to accept it. Chengzi stepped forward and took the brocade box from Li Liangyuan's hand, then stepped aside. Li Liangyuan laughed along with her. It's okay if Shen Liangdi doesn't dislike her. Concubine Su suddenly turned to look at Shen Chuwei. Shen Liangdi, now that Li Liangyuan is here, there are exactly 4 of us, how about we play cards? Shen Shuwei taught them how to play cards a few days ago, mainly to relieve her boredom. She just passed the time when she was idle. Shen Shuwei was having nothing to do now. He glanced at Tao Chenjui and Li Liangyuan and said, I have no problem. Do you all want to play? I don't have a problem either. Tao Chenjui turned to look at Li Liangyuan and asked, is there a problem with Li Liangyuan? Interaction is the best way to increase friendships and relationships, and Li Liangyuan will certainly not miss the opportunity to interact with them. There's nothing wrong with me, but what kind of cards do you play? I don't know how. Concubine Su put down the melon seeds in her hand, clapped her hands and said, it doesn't matter if you don't know how. It's very simple. We will teach you. Li Liangyuan agreed readily, okay. Seeing this, Shen Shuwei asked Gaixiang to take out the cards and put them on the table, and the four of them sat around the dining table. Concubine Su and Tao Chenjui took turns teaching Li Liangyuan how to fight the landlord. After teaching for a while and making sure that Li Liangyuan knew how to play, he started playing. Concubine Su suggested, how about playing with stickers this time? Put a piece of red paper on each time you lose. Tao Chenjui hit it off immediately, okay, it's more fun to play like this. Li Liangyuan laughed along, I have no objection. Shen Shuwei has no objection. She also likes to play with stickers because she has never lost. Concubine Su greeted, come on, get the cards. There are two piles of cards on the table, and the card on one pile is turned over. Whoever gets that card is the landlord. The four people took turns to take the cards, and the landlord was taken by Li Liangyuan. Concubine Su laughed and said, hey, Li Liangyuan is very lucky. She is a landlord for the first time. Li Liangyuan didn't understand. When Concubine Su said she was lucky, she really thought she was very lucky, wherever, the landlord's sisters take turns doing it. After Tao Chenjui dealt with the cards, he reminded, the landlord should play his cards. Okay, Li Liangyuan looked at the cards in her hand. The landlord could play out at will. She looked at the three of spades, took it out with her fingers and put it on the table, I'll play 3. Concubine Su, follow the landlord to play cards, I will play 5. Shen Shuwei, I'll give 10. Tao Chenjui, I got an A. Why did you come out with such a big deal? Li Liangyuan looked at her hand and saw that there was no chance to come out. Tao Chenjui smiled and said, because you are a landlord and you don't want to play big. Could it be that you, the landlord, are running away by playing small cards? Li Liangyuan endured the pain and pulled out a card, I play 2. Shen Shuwei, Xiao Wang. Li Liangyuan, Your Majesty. Shen Shuwei, 47s. Li Liangyuan looked at the 4Ks in her hand, thought for a moment and said, no. Shen Shuwei chuckled inwardly, but on the surface he was extremely calm, 3,456 in a row. Li Liangyuan hesitated for a few seconds but still shook her head, no. Shen Shuwei, 3 9s and a pair. Li Liangyuan saw that Shen Shuwei had only one card left in his hand. If he didn't blow up Shen Shuwei, he would leave. She drew 4 cards, 4 kings. Shen Chu shook his head slightly, no. Li Liangyuan, a pair of 4. Tao Chenjui, a pair of 2. Li Liangyuan, no. Tao Chenjui, 1 piece of 3. Li Liangyuan saw that the leaflet had no chance to be released, so Tao Chenjui delivered it to her door, 1 piece is 10. Concubine Su shook her head, no. She turned to look at Shen Shuwei. Shen Chu chuckled slightly, the last ace. Concubine Su happily put down the cards in her hand and laughed happily, Li Liangyuan, you lost. Only then did Li Liangyuan remember that Shen Shuwei had a card. She looked at Concubine Su in confusion, why didn't you stop me? Why should I stop you? The 3 of us are civilians, and we are here to fight you, the landlord. Concubine Su said matter-of-factly. Li Liangyuan then realized that she was a landlord, and the three of them were fighting against her alone. Come on, stick the red paper. Concubine Su picked up the red paper prepared in advance, dipped it in some water, and stuck it on Li Liangyuan's face. After Concubine Su finished posting, she stared at Li Liangyuan's face for a few times and couldn't help laughing. Okay, let's continue. Li Liangyuan didn't have a mirror in her hand, and she didn't know what her face would look like with the red paper on it, so she had no choice but to continue playing. Li Liangyuan's luck was not very good. She was a landlord 3 times in a row. At the same time, she was not very lucky. She lost all 3 times. Concubine Su likes to stick red paper on people, and she sticks it on Li Liangyuan's 2 cheeks and forehead. Li Liangyuan drooped her shoulders, wondering why she always lost. She looked at the cards in front of her, and she had to win once this time. After a round, Li Liangyuan lost again. Concubine Su couldn't wait to pick up the red paper and dip it in water, and then stuck it on Li Liangyuan's nose. Li Liangyuan lost 4 times in a row, and her face was covered with red paper. She was a little impatient. I don't want to play anymore. Concubine Su said, why? Isn't playing cards like this? There are wins and losses. It's normal for you to lose just now. But I keep losing. Look at my face. Do you still want it? Li Liangyuan pointed at her face and said. Tao Chenjui comforted him, Li Liangyuan, this is normal. When Shen Liangdi taught us to play, we both had red paper all over our faces, more than you. Li Liangyuan looked at Concubine Su in disbelief. Really? Concubine Su nodded. Of course it's true, we both played several times before we figured out the trick. Li Liangyuan then continued to play. After playing for an hour, except for Shen Shuwei who didn't have red paper, the 3 of them had different amounts of stickers on their faces. This is what Chang Liangdi saw when she came. She looked at them in surprise. What are you doing? When Li Liangyuan saw Chang Liangdi coming, she thought of her face covered with red paper, and she was so embarrassed for a while. Who knew that Chang Liangdi would come to Xiun Pavilion? Concubine Su raised the corner of her lips. We are playing cards. Does Chang Liangdi want to play? Do you guys know how to play landlord? It's actually quite fun. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 145. Chang Liangdi looked at the 3 of them with red paper on their faces, and it was no less than seeing a monster. She shook her head. I don't want to play, you guys play. Concubine Su felt bored, and she wanted to stick red paper on Chang Liangdi's cheek. She turned her head. Then let's continue playing. Chang Liangdi ignored Concubine Su. She looked at Shen Shuwei who was sitting by the window. Among the 4 people, she was the only one who didn't have red paper on her face, which was really strange. Shen Liangdi, are you feeling better? Shen Shuwei said lightly, thank you Chang Liangdi for your concern, I'm much better now. Chang Liangdi smiled lightly, sisters, we should care about each other. While speaking, she looked at Shen Shuwei's face and dressing taste. Unlike the others, Shen Shuwei's makeup was light, and her cheeks were rosy and shiny without makeup. Her hair was also very simple, with only 2 peach blossom hairpins. The lotus pink cotton coat made her cheeks look even more pink. So His Highness likes this. Which woman in the palace would dress herself like this? Concubine Su reminded, Shen Liangdi, play a card. Shen Shuwei looked at the cards in her hand. Here it comes. Chang Liangdi sat aside and watched for a while, feeling bored, so she found a reason to leave. After returning, Chang Liangdi told the maid to dress herself according to Shen Shuwei's dress. The maid had just followed her to Xiun Pavilion and knew what Shen Liangdi was wearing. She was very skillful and combed her hair in the same way in a short while, only with 2 pink pearl flowers. The makeup on her cheeks was washed off, revealing her bare face. The green clothes were changed to pink. The maid looked at her for a few times and said, "My lady, this outfit is much more plain." Chang Liangdi stared at herself in the mirror for a few times and was quite satisfied. "This is the effect I want. My lady is naturally beautiful, even without makeup, she is very beautiful. No one in the East Palace can compare to her," the maid praised in a gentle voice. Chang Liangdi ordered, "Prepare snacks, I will personally send them to His Highness to taste." "I will prepare them now." After everything was ready, Chang Liangdi took the snacks to the prince's bedroom. Only when she went there did she know that the prince had not returned yet. Chang Liangdi stood aside and waited. Meow. Suddenly, a cat's cry came, attracting Chang Liangdi's attention. She lowered her eyes and saw Switchuan lying on the furry blanket, staring at her with a pair of blue eyes without blinking. Chang Liangdi thought of Shen Shuwei holding Switchuan, and Switchuan looked docile, and wanted to try it again. His Highness likes Shen Shuwei, and maybe it has something to do with Switchuan. Chang Liangdi lifted her skirt and squatted in front of Switchuan. Switchuan immediately widened his eyes and suddenly supported his two front legs. Chang Liangdi trembled with fear, but thinking that if she pleased Switchuan, His Highness would look at her with new eyes, she plucked up the courage to approach. "Switchuan, be good, I'll give you fish." When she came, she specially prepared a fish. The maid took out the whole fish and handed it to Chang Liangdi. "My lady, fish." Chang Liangdi held the fish and carefully placed it in front of Switchuan, for fear that Switchuan would suddenly stretch out his claws to scratch her. In fact, she was still a little afraid of Switchuan. When Switchuan got fierce, it would make people feel creepy. Xiao Jinyan came back from outside and saw a figure squatting on the ground. He looked familiar, because he was facing away and couldn't see his face. Xiaju. When Chang Liangdi heard the familiar voice, she knew that His Highness had returned. She was a little happy in her heart. His Highness would definitely look at her with a new eye when he saw her and Switchuan being so close. Chang Liangdi was happy and ignored the unfamiliar name. She did not stand up, pretending to be very serious and devoted. Seeing that she ignored him, Xiao Jinyan walked over in confusion and saw that she was feeding Switchuan with fish. "Xiaju, don't feed Switchuan, it has become fat as a ball." Switchuan stood up dissatisfied, tied up his tail, and grinned at Xiao Jinyan, looking very fierce. "Meow." Suddenly kicked over the fish in front of him, and the soup splashed all over Chang Liangdi, and the pink skirt was stained with a lot of oil stains. Ah, Chang Liangdi was so scared that she sat on the ground. It was the first time that Xiao Jinyan saw Switchuan being fierce in front of Shen Shuwei. He frowned and scolded coldly, "Switchuan." Switchuan stepped on the fish soup with all four limbs and pounced on Chang Liangdi. The pink clothes were all covered with cat paw prints stained with fish soup. It was just a moment, so fast that people had no time to stop it. After the snowball rubbed it, it scratched the clothes with its claws, and then ran away, and the white figure disappeared at the door. In a hurry, Xiao Jinyan went forward to help Shen Shuwei. "Xiaoju, are you hurt?" Chang Liangdi was frightened at this time. Her clothes and hair were a little messy, and hearing the prince's concern for her comforted her injured heart. She raised her head and looked at the prince with messy hair, a little excited. "Your Highness." When Xiao Jinyan saw that face, he immediately withdrew his hand, stood up straight, and shouted to the door, "Lu 11." Lu 11 was standing at the door, and rushed in immediately after hearing the call. Seeing Chang Liangdi on the ground, without waiting for the master's order, he took 2 steps forward. "Chang Liangdi, let me help you up." Xiao Jinyan stood there straight, looking at Chang Liangdi coldly. Both her clothes and her appearance were exactly the same as Shen Shuwei's. Chang Liangdi would never wear such plain clothes before. Shen Shuwei was young, so this kind of dress made her look more playful and cute. As for Chang Liangdi, she was a few years older than her. She was not playful and cute by nature, but her dress was too deliberate to make people uncomfortable. After Lu 11 helped Chang Liangdi up, he stepped aside and waited. Chang Liangdi saw that her clothes were dirty and messy, and she couldn't take them anymore. They were all covered in snow. Why did she suddenly go crazy? She raised her eyes and looked at Xiao Jinyan, her tone full of panic. Your Highness, I just wanted to feed Xuetuan some fish, but I didn't expect that it would suddenly go crazy. Xiao Jinyan was just wondering why Xuetuan, who had always been submissive to Shen Shuwei, suddenly attacked Shen Shuwei. Now he understood, because even if Chang Liangdi dressed like Shen Shuwei, she was not Shen Shuwei. At first, because of her familiar dress, he mistakenly thought Chang Liangdi was Shen Shuwei. When he saw her being attacked by a snowball, he ignored the details in his desperation. You clearly know that Sichuan doesn't like you, and you won't eat the food you feed. If Sichuan hurts you, how will I explain to my mother? Chang Liangdi lowered her eyes and felt extremely aggrieved. Your Highness, I just thought that Sichuan didn't like the smell of rouge and gouache, so she came here without any makeup. I didn't expect this to happen. But she was unwilling to give in. Why was Shen Shuwei okay just holding the snowball? Will the snowballs attack her as soon as she gets close? I don't know what insidious means Shen Shuwei used. Xiao Jinyan heard her inner complaints and his eyes became colder. Don't get close to the snowball. It has a wild temper and will regret it if it scratches you. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 146. As soon as Shen Shuwei sent Tao Chenjui and the others away, he saw a snow-white figure running quickly from outside, leaving a row of cat paw prints in the snow behind him. When it got closer, the snowball slowed down its running pace. When Xuetuan wanted to jump into her arms, Shen Shuwei saw Xuetuan's purpose and stepped aside. Xuetuan jumped into the air, looked up at Shen Shuwei, and cried out very aggrievedly, "Meow." Shen Shuwei knelt down, holding a clean cloth, and said to Sichuan, "Pick up your feet and I'll wipe them for you." Xuetuan seemed to understand, and he raised his forelimbs obediently. The snow-white fur was stained with rain and snow. Shen Shuwei found that Xuetuan was very tidy. The prince's palace was a long way from Xiun Pavilion. Apart from rain and snow, there was not even mud, water, or dirt on his paws. After wiping his limbs, Shen Shuwei picked up the snowball and sat on the couch. Xuetuan crawled into Shen Shuwei's arms aggrievedly and called out in a low voice, "Meow." Shen Shuwei noticed that something was wrong with Sichuan today. She rubbed its furry head and asked, "What happened today? Who bullied you?" Meow. Xuetuan raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei, his eyes seemed to be looking for comfort from her. Shen Shuwei was not good at comforting others. She would eat when she was unhappy, and eating would relieve her worries. She took out two ham sausages from the space and tore open the package. When Xuetuan saw the ham sausage, his eyes glowed green, he opened his mouth and took a bite, eating it leisurely. Shen Shuwei looked at the snow dumplings and ate them with gusto. Look, there is nothing that one ham sausage can't solve. If not, just 2 ham sausages. Xiao Jinyan opened the door curtain and came in. When he saw a person and a cat on the couch, he knew that Sichuan would only come to Xiun Pavilion. Shen Shuwei saw Xiao Jinyan coming, stood up with the snowball in his arms, and said, "Your Highness." When Sichuan saw Xiao Jinyan coming, he turned away from him and continued to eat the remaining ham. Needless to say, Xuetuan was angry. Shen Shuwei didn't know what happened and asked Xiao Jinyan in confusion, "Your Highness, is someone bullying Sichuan?" He was aggrieved when he came. Xiao Jinyan came over and said, "I have misunderstood it." Sichuan still turned away from him. Shen Shuwei asked casually, What's going on? Nothing. Oh. Shen Shuwei lowered his head and looked at Xuetuan, thinking that there was nothing wrong with Xuetuan. Look at Xuetuan, even those who feel wronged will ignore you. After Xiao Jinyan heard this, he looked at Xuetuan, who was turning his head away from him. He was indeed very angry. He looked back at Shen Shuwei and said calmly, "On the 8th day of the first lunar month, I will accompany my mother to the White Horse Temple to offer incense." Shen Shuwei listened but said nothing because she was not interested in offering incense. Xiao Jinyan waited for a while and saw that Shen Shuwei had no reaction. "You don't want to go?" Shen Chu said softly, "Your Highness is accompanying the Queen, and I will not join in the fun." Xiao Jinyan heard this and added, "Chang Liangdi is also going." When Shen Shuwei heard the words Chang Liangdi, she immediately understood that Xiao Jinyan and Chang Liangdi were having a cold war. Both of them were cold and arrogant, and neither of them bowed their heads. So at this time, she is needed as a tool to mediate the relationship between the two. It's really not easy to be Xiao Jinyan's concubine. When Shen Shuwei's thoughts reached Xiao Jinyan's ears, his eyes paused. How long had it been? She was still thinking about it? Wasn't he clear enough? Why put him and Chang Liangdi together to figure out the plot? Shen Shuwei asked, "Does His Highness want this concubine to follow you? If you are going to a banquet, it doesn't matter if you are a light bulb. Anyway, there is something to eat, so it is well worth it. It's not cost-effective to run back and forth to the temple, be tired, and have to be a light bulb." Xiao Jinyan didn't understand the meaning of the light bulb before, but after listening to Shen Shuwei's brainstorming plot, he guessed the meaning of the light bulb. After Xiao Jinyan heard this, his blood pressure rose sharply. He clenched the teacup in his hand, gritted his teeth and asked, "What do you think?" Shen Chu lowered his eyes slightly, looking very obedient and said, "I listen to your highness." Xiao Jinyan explained, "The Queen Mother insisted on taking Chang Liangdi with her, it was not my wish." Shen Chu nodded slightly, "I understand that your highness does not want to be with Chang Liangdi." Xiao Jinyan listened and nodded with satisfaction, finally clearing up the misunderstanding. But the next second I heard Shen Shuwei say in her heart that when lovers are in a cold war, they are always tough talking. They say they don't want to on the surface, but actually they are willing in their hearts. I have seen too many plots in this novel. Xiao Jinyan was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He raised his eyes and looked at Shen Shuwei. She seemed obedient on the surface, but who knew she was thinking about some messy things in her heart. Xiao Jinyan stood up angrily, opened the door curtain and wanted to go out. As soon as he opened the door curtain, he heard Shen Shuwei say in his heart, "Has His Highness figured it out?" Xiao Jinyan held the door curtain tightly and turned to look at Shen Shuwei, "You, come with me." After saying that, he left without looking back. He was afraid that he would be angry to death if he heard what Shen Shuwei was saying again. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan's leaving figure with a confused look on his face. Why was he so angry? Xiao Jinyan didn't expect to hear Shen Shuwei's inner thoughts after he came out. Why should I be angry? Don't you know best? In the past, these misunderstandings were nothing more than trivial matters in Xiao Jinyan's eyes. Whether others misunderstood or were curious, he didn't care. I didn't expect that one day, I would be so angry because of this incident. On the 8th day of the lunar month, the wind was warm and the sun was beautiful. Shen Shuwei held Sichuan in her arms, followed Xiao Jinyan, and walked side by side with Chang Liangdi, toward the luxurious Phoenix sedan chair not far away. Sichuan was probably the most angry this time, so she didn't go back to the prince's palace for 2 consecutive days and stayed in Xiun Pavilion. The Phoenix sedan chair that the queen took was very spacious and luxurious, and 4 people sitting in it didn't seem crowded at all. The queen got on the Phoenix sedan chair with the help of Qingying Mama and sat in the middle seat. According to the rules, Xiao Jinyan had to go up first, but he saw Shen Shuwei and Chang Liangdi behind him and changed his mind. He looked at Chang Liangdi, you go first. Yes, Your Highness. Chang Liangdi bowed and got on the Phoenix sedan chair with the help of Qingying Mama. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei and reached out his hand. Shen Liangdi, you go up first. Yes, Your Highness. Shen Shuwei held Sichuan and saw the beautiful hand in front of her. She raised her hand and put it on the big hand, then stepped on the horse stool and got on the Phoenix seal. After entering the Phoenix seal, Shen Shuwei saw the queen sitting in the middle, and Chang Liangdi sitting on the right of the queen. Without thinking, she sat on the left side, because Chang Liangdi specially left a seat for Xiao Jinyan between her and the queen. The queen took a look at Shen Liangdi and changed her opinion of her. It was not only because of her good cooking skills, but also because of the scene at the New Year's Eve family dinner. If it weren't for her, it would be the prince who got into trouble. Xiao Jinyan, if I die young, you will take full responsibility. This time when I go to the White Horse Temple, Xiao Jinyan will use a big trick. Shen Shuwei trembled. 4 chapters of spicy food have been updated today, with 8,000 words, and there will be updates. I'm acting cute and coquettishly to ask for monthly tickets and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 147. After Xiao Jinyan entered, he took a look at the situation inside and sat down next to Shen Shuwei. The 3 people in the Phoenix chariot all looked at Xiao Jinyan. The queen frowned slightly and glanced at the seat next to Chang Liangdi. Such a large empty seat is not enough for you to sit. Xiao Jinyan. Enough, I just don't want to. Chang Liangdi looked at Xiao Jinyan sitting next to Shen Shuwei. On the surface, she was gentle and generous, but she felt very uncomfortable in her heart. She deliberately reserved a seat, but His Highness turned a blind eye. Looking at Shen Shuwei holding Sichuan, Sichuan changed her usual gentleness, as if Shen Shuwei was its owner. Xiao Jinyan directly ignored Chang Liangdi's complaints. Shen Shuwei held Sichuan and treated herself as a transparent person, but Xiao Jinyan sat next to her, which immediately made her, a transparent person, like wrapped in highlights, become extremely eye-catching. She could feel the gazes of the queen and Chang Liangdi, as if they wanted to eat her. She wailed in her heart, being the prince's concubine, it's so hard. Xiao Jinyan. What's hard about you? What have you arranged for me to be like? The Phoenix chariot drove for a while, and it was quiet inside, with only the sound of the wheels of the Phoenix chariot. The queen looked at the cat in Shen Shuwei's arms, and saw that it was very similar to the prince's pet. She said with doubt, the cat in Shen Liangdi's arms is very similar to the prince's pet Sichuan. Shen Shuwei replied respectfully, replying to the queen, this is your highness's pet Sichuan. The queen's eyes flashed with surprise when she heard it. This is Sichuan? The first time the queen saw Sichuan was 5 years ago, when Xiao Jinyan brought it back. At that time, Xiao Jinyu was only 11 years old. He knew from a young age that he had a brother far away in another country. He was so happy to know that his brother was coming back. When he saw the Sichuan in Xiao Jinyan's arms, he wanted to hold it and play with it for a while. Unexpectedly, the originally docile cat suddenly bared its teeth and claws and scratched Xiao Jinyu. She was so distressed at the time that she wanted to vent her anger on Sichuan. But before she got close, Sichuan pounced on her. If Xiao Jinyan hadn't hugged Sichuan in time, she would have been scratched by Sichuan. Later, Xiao Jinyu's injury healed a little and ran to her and said, brother's cat is shy. Only brother can hold it? No one else can hold it? I like Sichuan too much. I hugged it without asking brother. Brother didn't ask Sichuan to scratch me. The queen herself has also raised cats. Most cats are very docile and will not scratch people when they see them. Only trained cats will listen to their owners and take the initiative to attack people. Now look at Shen Shuwei holding Sichuan, but Sichuan doesn't mean to attack her at all. Sichuan can't be hugged by strangers. It will scratch people if it touches it. Why is it so docile when you hold it? Chang Liangdi also wanted to know why Shen Shuwei held Sichuan, but Sichuan didn't attack her. She pricked up her ears to listen, and she would try the method she learned. Xiao Jinyan was also curious, but he had asked last time, and the answer was a bit far-fetched. Shen Shuwei said respectfully, replying to the queen, I don't know why. The first time I held Sichuan was so obedient and didn't attack me. Really? Why would others be attacked when they hold Sichuan? The queen obviously didn't believe it. It's not like she hadn't seen the scene of Sichuan attacking people with her own eyes. Yours was the best proof. Shen Shuwei lowered her eyebrows and nodded, replying to the queen, I don't know. The queen's phoenix eyes swept towards Xiao Jinyan, Prince, do you know? Xiao Jinyan said, replying to the queen, I am also curious about the reason. The queen asked, even you don't know? Xiao Jinyan, yes, mother. The queen looked at Sichuan in Shen Shuwei's arms again. Although she was confused, she didn't continue the topic. It was lunchtime when they arrived at the White Horse Temple. The group had a vegetarian meal at the White Horse Temple. The queen has always been very picky. She doesn't like the food in the imperial kitchen, let alone the vegetarian food. She couldn't eat it after just 2 bites. Shen Shuwei is a food lover and a foodie. Vegetarian food doesn't suit her taste at all. She leaned close to Xiao Jinyan's ear and whispered, Your Highness, my stomach hurts a little. In fact, it was just an excuse to get away. Hearing this, Xiao Jinyan asked in a low voice, Why do you have a stomachache? Did you catch a cold? Shen Shuwei shook her head, I don't know. Xiao Jinyan said, I'll ask the imperial doctor to take your pulse. This time, I brought an imperial doctor with me, just in case. No need, Your Highness, I'll just go to the toilet. Xiao Jinyan's eyes paused. He was having a meal. Shen Shuwei said, I didn't want to say it so clearly, but you insisted on me saying it. Xiao Jinyan instructed, Go and come back quickly. I know, Shen Shuwei said, holding up her skirt and leaving. She searched the yard for a long time before she saw a little monk sweeping the floor. The little monk was only about 15 or 16 years old, as tall as Xiao Jinyu, and had a handsome face. Shen Chu smiled and ran over, little monk, do you have hot water? The little monk looked up and saw a beautiful girl. He was stunned for a moment, then raised his hand, Yes, please wait a moment. The little monk put down the broom and turned to get water. Shen Shuwei didn't have to wait long before the little monk brought hot water. The little monk handed the kettle to Shen Shuwei and reminded her, Donor, be careful not to burn your hands. Shen Shuwei found that the little monk was not only good looking, but also very attentive. She arched her eyebrows and said, Thank you, little monk. You're welcome, Donor. After the little monk finished speaking, he picked up the broom again. Shen Shuwei was about to leave with the kettle in hand when she saw the young monk's immature face turned red from the cold wind. She thought about taking out a bag of disposable masks from her sleeve pocket, but actually used her mind to take out a bag of disposable masks from space. This kind of mask is specially designed for winter and can block wind and keep warm. She handed the mask to the young monk and said, Little monk, this is for you. The young monk hurriedly refused, Donor, monks can't accept it. It's just a mask. Shen Shuwei was afraid that he wouldn't wear it, so she took out one and showed it to him, That's how you wear it. The young monk stared at Shen Shuwei with his clear eyes. Wearing a mask, she only showed a pair of clear eyes, which were more dazzling than the stars. Thank you for the hot water. Shen Shuwei put the mask into the little monk's hand, ran away with the hot water bottle. The little monk watched the pink figure run away after getting it. He looked down at the mask in his hand and was stunned for a few seconds. Shen Shuwei sneaked to the corner of the yard and took out a bucket of spicy beef instant noodles. There are a lot of instant noodles in buckets and bags in the space, and there are several flavors. She tore open the package and put the condiments in one by one. She picked up the hot water and was about to pour it in when a familiar female voice came from above her head. Shen Liangdi, what are you doing here? Isn't this the Queen's voice? Ah. Working hard to catch up on the manuscript. There are updates. Please vote. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 148. Chapter 148. The Queen helped to cover up the lie, and also wanted to pay homage to Guanyin. Shen Chu poured the water for a moment, then looked up and saw the Queen staring at her curiously, making her feel like she had been caught stealing something. Well, she is indeed eating secretly. Back to the Queen, I'm eating instant noodles. The Queen was originally out for a stroll. When she saw Shen Shuwei's sneaky appearance, she followed her curiously, not expecting that she was stealing something to eat. She put her head over and looked at it carefully. She had never seen such food in her whole life. What are instant noodles? Shen Shuwei explained, instant noodles are a type of noodles and they taste good. Well, does the Queen want a bucket? Forget it, everyone who sees it has a share. No, this is called bribery. The Queen looked at the dry noodles and the dark stuff inside and expressed doubt, can this thing be eaten? Shen Shuwei answered affirmatively, of course I can eat it. The Queen asked again, how does it taste? Shen Chu thought for a moment and said, I think it tastes good. Seeing that Shen Shuwei was so sure, the Queen knew that she would be hungry right now, so she didn't want to try it because it wouldn't cost her any money. Really, how about letting me taste it? After the Queen finished speaking, she reached out and was about to bring the bucket of instant noodles, but Shen Shuwei stopped her in time. Your Majesty, you can't eat it now. The Queen asked with a puzzled look, why? It's not like eating noodles dry, you can eat them dry. Shen Shuwei explained, instant noodles need to be soaked in hot water for a while before you can eat them. The Queen suddenly realized, that's it? The Queen, please sit down and wait for a while I, the concubine, take a dip first. Okay. The Queen sat down on the stool and waited slowly. Shen Shuwei poured the hot water in and closed the lid. The Queen was very patient and never pressed her to see if she could eat. About 6 minutes later, Shen Chu slightly opened the lid, stirred it with a fork for a while, then put his hands in front of the Queen. Queen, you can eat. Then the fork was handed to the Queen. The Queen took the fork and stared at the steaming noodles for a while. Curiously, she picked up the noodles with her fork and blew them to cool down before putting them into her mouth to chew. It tasted like something she had never tasted before, but it was surprisingly delicious. It's just that she's not used to using a fork, so she wants to use chopsticks. However, I couldn't resist the temptation of delicious food, so I made do with it. Shen Shuwei saw the Queen eating with gusto, which made her even hungrier. She licked her lips. When the Queen wasn't paying attention, she turned around and ran out. The Queen saw Shen Shuwei running away suddenly and wanted to ask her why she was there, but she was eating noodles and couldn't spare the time. Shen Shuwei suddenly ran away to sneak instant noodles from the space, which she also wanted to eat. When she came back, she had a bucket of instant noodles in her hand, and the package was torn open on the way. The Queen then took the opportunity to ask Shen Shuwei, where have you been? I'm going to get instant noodles. Shen Shuwei put the instant noodles on the table, took out the seasonings with ease, then tore them open and put them in one by one, and then poured hot water on them. The Queen praised, instant noodles taste good, better than vegetarian rice. Of course it's not Shen Chu Weibo, instant noodles are most people's favorite, especially those who eat them for the first time, they find them even more delicious. After waiting for a few minutes, Shen Shuwei also started to eat. The two of them didn't talk anymore, because they were both hungry, and eating was the most important thing. The queen wiped her nose with a handkerchief while eating. At this time, she looked a little different from her usual aloof demeanor. In the presence of delicious food, she did not care about the elegance and indecency of her actions. Shen Shuwei also held a handkerchief while eating and wiping it, very rhythmically. After eating and drinking, Shen Shuwei touched his belly with satisfaction. The queen was also satisfied and slowly wiped her mouth with a handkerchief. She found that she was still a little cold just now, but after eating instant noodles, her whole body began to heat up. She raised her eyes to look at Shen Chu, who was sitting opposite, and said slightly, "Shen Liangdi, it's time to go back." Shen Shuwei also felt that it was time to go back, otherwise Xiao Jinyan should be anxious. Good. The queen stood up and walked ahead with dignified steps. Shen Shuwei followed slowly. Xiao Jinyan finished his lunch and sat waiting for Shen Shuwei to come back, and couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Chang Liangdi came slowly over with a new cup of tea and offered the tea with both hands. "Your Highness, please drink some tea to warm yourself up." How could Xiao Jinyan be thinking about drinking tea at this moment? He refused coldly, "No." When Chang Liangdi saw Xiao Jinyan looking outside from time to time, she comforted her and said, "Your Highness, Shen Liangdi is not a child anymore. She will know when she comes back when she goes out. But I was thinking in my heart, it would be better if I went out and never came back." When Xiao Jinyan's cold gaze glanced at Chang Liangdi, she couldn't help but shudder. In Xiao Jinyan's eyes, Shen Shuwei is just a child. I thought that since White Horse Temple is so big, Xiaju might have gotten lost. Thinking of this possibility, he walked out quickly. As soon as he walked out, he saw the queen and Shen Shuwei walking towards the side one after the other. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. When someone came closer, he asked in a low voice, "Why are you coming back now?" Shen Chu glanced at the queen and said, "Your Highness, I met the queen on the way back, and then we came back together." The queen went out to eat with Shen Shuwei, so she naturally had to help with the lie. Shen Liangdi is right. We just chatted for a while and wasted some time. Chang Liangdi was a little unhappy when she saw the queen and Shen Liangdi coming back together. Shen Shuwei seduced the prince to compete for favor, and now she came to please her aunt? Her aunt supported her, and she couldn't let Shen Shuwei snatch her away. Chang Liangdi smiled and took the queen's arm, reminding her gently, "Aunt, it's windy outside, you should go in first." The queen nodded guiltily, "Yes, we go in first." Xiao Jinyan glanced at Shen Shuwei and the queen, and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. After lunch, the queen took the prince, Chang Liangdi, and Shen Shuwei to worship Buddha. First, pray for the emperor's safety. The second is to hold her grandson as soon as possible, so that she can also show off. Worshipping Buddha and chanting scriptures for about an hour. The queen knelt straight, knocking the wooden fish in her hand and muttering something. Xiao Jinyan also knelt straight. Shen Shuwei is a modern person, how can she bear kneeling for a long time? By now, both legs were numb. She rubbed her legs and felt uncomfortable. Xiao Jinyan saw Shen Shuwei's actions and asked in a low voice, "Do your legs hurt?" Shen Shuwei nodded and whispered, "Yeah, I can't kneel anymore." Xiao Jinyan comforted, "Hold it a little longer, it will be over soon." Shen Shuwei was about to split. "I shouldn't say, don't kneel if it hurts." "Xiao Jinyan, where is your domineering CEO style?" Just when Shen Shuwei was about to give up, the queen stood up. Shen Shuwei couldn't even get up because her legs were numb. Seeing this, Xiao Jinyan stretched out his hand to lift her up. She was very light and was easily lifted up. Shen Shuwei put all her body weight on Xiao Jinyan. The queen said, "Let's go, I will take you to worship the goddess of childbirth." Shen Shuwei's legs softened. "What? Worship the goddess of childbirth again? Good night, my dears." There are so many updates, please give me monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 149. Xiao Jinyan found that Shen Shui's body sank and frowned. Is she so delicate? He used some strength in his hands and lifted her up. Chang Liangdi looked at Xiao Jinyan's hand holding Shen Shui and holding the small handkerchief in his hand tightly. Shen Shui was obviously pretending to be so as to arouse the pity of the prince. Xiao Jinyan. Do you think everyone can pretend like you? The guanyin of childbirth is not far from the main hall. Turn left and walk a few steps to get there. Because the queen came to worship Buddha and pray for blessings, the temple master cooperated with the guards to clear the venue in advance. Shen Shui followed the queen and walked slowly in. She looked up at the guanyin of childbirth above. She had kind eyes and was accompanied by a golden boy and a jade girl. The incense in front of her was strong, indicating that many people were burning incense to pray for children. When the queen and Xiao Jinyan knelt on the futon one after another, she could only kneel down resignedly. Her legs, which had just been relieved, seemed to have consciousness. As soon as she knelt down, she began to feel all kinds of pain and discomfort. The queen was mumbling something. Even though Shen Shui couldn't hear clearly, she guessed that the queen was praying for a child. Xiao Jinyan had been taking concubines for more than half a year. There were many beauties around him, but he had no children. As a mother-in-law, the queen must be anxious to have a grandchild. From ancient times to the present, the hearts of parents in the world are the same. She used to think that she was the only one in the East Palace who didn't sleep with the emperor. Now, she didn't know who really slept with the emperor. Fortunately, the queen didn't mutter for a long time this time. Shen Shui secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Next time she came to burn incense and worship Buddha, she would definitely find an excuse not to come. After the queen finished burning incense, she turned and looked at Shen Shui and Chang Liangdi. Chang Liangdi, Shen Liangdi, you also come to burn incense? Yes, and Chang Liangdi lifted her skirt and wanted to stand up. As soon as she stood up, her feet softened and she fell into Xiao Jinyu's arms. Xiao Jinyan saw a green figure falling over from the corner of his eye, and he dodged sideways without making a sound. Ah! Chang Liangdi screamed and fell flat on her face. Lanner the queen hurried over, quick, help Lanner up. Qingying was closest to Chang Liangdi, so she took 2 steps forward to help Chang Liangdi up. The queen looked Chang Liangdi up and down. She was wearing thick clothes in winter, so she couldn't see if she was injured. Lanner, are you okay? Xiao Jinyan seemed to have just seen it, and took a step forward to ask, why did you fall suddenly? Chang Liangdi fell hard, and her eyes were red from the pain. My leg suddenly cramped and I couldn't stand firmly, and my leg hurt. She originally wanted to imitate Shen Shui's numb legs and fall into Xiao Jinyan's arms, but she didn't expect to fall so badly. Seeing Chang Liangdi almost crying in pain, the queen felt very distressed. She ordered, Qingying, send Lanner back to her room to rest, and let the imperial doctor come to see Lanner. Yes, Qingying called another palace maid, and the 2 of them worked together to send Chang Liangdi back to the wing room. It was not until Chang Liangdi's figure disappeared at the door that she retracted her gaze and looked at Shen Shui. It was particularly cold today, and she wore a pink fox fur coat, looking cute and lovely. If she gave birth to a girl, she would definitely look good. Shen Liangdi, come and burn incense for the goddess of childbirth, and try to get a child as soon as possible. Shen Shui looked up at Xiao Jinyan, Your Highness, I don't need to burn incense for the goddess of childbirth, right? I don't need to. Xiao Jinyan thought her legs were numb again and she was looking for help. He took 2 steps forward, grabbed her hand and asked, "Why, your legs are numb again." Shen Shuwei forgot that she and Xiao Jinyan had no tacit understanding, so naturally she couldn't understand the meaning of her eyes. In front of the queen, she couldn't explain. Shen Shuwei nodded, "Yes, it's a little numb." Xiao Jinyan only felt that Shen Shuwei was weak, and her legs were numb after kneeling for a while. She had to make up for it when she returned to the palace. Then wait until the numbness is gone before burning incense to Guanyin, the goddess of childbirth. Shen Shuwei. Your Highness, are you serious? The queen saw that Shen Shuwei's feet were numb, and she didn't urge her, "It doesn't matter if you want a child for a moment. Guanyin, the goddess of childbirth, is kind and generous, and won't blame you." Shen Shuwei. The key is that she doesn't need to pray for a child, okay? Shen Shuwei's legs were not numb at first, and after a while, she burned incense to Guanyin, the goddess of childbirth, under the guidance of the little monk. She found that the little monk who gave her the incense was the little monk who gave her hot water. She smiled at the little monk, and then walked over with the incense. The little monk was stunned for a moment, then lowered his eyes and stepped aside. After offering incense, the queen asked the prince and Shen Liangdi to kowtow to the goddess of childbirth again, so that the goddess of childbirth would send more, both boys and girls, and twins would be better. The queen hurriedly restrained her desire, not to be too greedy. If the goddess of childbirth was unhappy, she knelt for so long and chanted the sutra for so long, it was nothing. If she didn't send one, it would be over. I don't know who just said that the goddess of childbirth was kind and benevolent. It was dark after worshipping the goddess of childbirth. Dinner was still vegetarian, with simple tea and rice. The queen didn't even want to move her chopsticks after seeing it, and suddenly missed the instant noodles Shen Shuwei gave her. Qingying knew the queen. She picked up the chopsticks and handed them to the queen, comforting her, "Your Majesty, now in the White Horse Temple, you can only eat vegetarian food, you will be hungry if you don't eat." The queen sighed, helplessly took the chopsticks from Qingying's hand, but hesitated to move. She had to stay in the White Horse Temple for 2 more days, which meant she had to eat 6 vegetarian meals, and she felt desperate just thinking about it. If she had known earlier, she should have asked Shen Shuwei for a few buckets of instant noodles. In the next room, Shen Shuwei looked at the bland soup and didn't need to eat, although she was hungry now. Xiao Jinyan ate 2 mouthfuls of vegetarian food slowly. Seeing Shen Shuwei holding the chopsticks without moving, he asked, "What's wrong?" Shen Shuwei raised her little face and looked at Xiao Jinyan, "I want to eat braised pork." Xiao Jinyan looked at the pair of expectant eyes, raised his hand and tapped her forehead, "This is a temple, a place for vegetarians and Buddhists, how can you eat meat?" Shen Shuwei drooped her shoulders, "I'm just thinking about it. I really want to eat braised pork, braised fish, braised spare ribs." She suddenly understood why girls like overbearing CEOs, because overbearing CEOs, as long as you say you want to eat, you will arrange it immediately. Xiao Jinyan picked up a piece of lettuce and put it in Shen Shuwei's bowl. "When we return to the palace, we will have everything we want to eat." Shen Shuwei looked at the lettuce in the bowl, and there was no oil, which showed that it was not delicious. I know. After saying that, she picked up the lettuce and put it in her mouth. As expected, the taste was light. Xiao Jinyan stared at her for a while, then lowered his head and continued to eat. After dinner, Shen Shuwei found an excuse to slip out of the wing room. She carried a lantern and walked along the bluestone road towards the back door. During the day, she walked around and knew that the back door here was connected to the woods under the back mountain. The guards outside the door saw Shen Shuwei and naturally did not stop her. After walking for a long time, she arrived at the back door. Shen Shuwei opened the bolt and made a creaking sound when she opened the old wooden door. There were 2 red lanterns on the door, and a forest came into view. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 150. Shen Shuwei was mainly greedy. If he didn't eat meat tonight, he would feel so sick that his heart would be disturbed and he wouldn't even be able to sleep. So I thought of sneaking out to catch wild game to satisfy my craving. This is a back mountain, and it is difficult for the sun to shine in during the day, so the snow has not melted. She walked deeper through the snow and came to a tree. She took out the rope from her arms, tied a slip knot and placed it in the snow. She reached into her sleeve pocket and took out a green vegetable and put it in the trap. After doing this, she took the rope and retreated all the way behind a big tree, then squatted down and started waiting for the rabbit. Shen Shuwei always had good luck. After a while, a gray wild rabbit jumped over and gnawed on the cabbage in the trap. Shen Shuwei saw the right moment and pulled the rope hard. By the time the hare realized something was wrong and wanted to run away, it was already too late. His feet were trapped by the rope and he could only struggle desperately on the ground. "There's roast rabbit to eat." Shen Shuwei put away the rope, grabbed the rabbit's ears, and happily walked to the river when a warm voice came from behind. "Donor, what are you doing?" Shen Shu paused slightly, looked back, and saw a person standing behind him, holding a lantern in his hand. Through the light, he saw the face of the person who came. It was a little monk, the little monk who gave her hot water. She raised the rabbit in her hand and said, "I'll roast the rabbit." Then she added, "I'll bake it outside and eat it instead of going to the temple. Should it be okay?" The little monk asked doubtfully, "Is the donor hungry?" Shen Shuwei didn't have a few bites of dinner, so of course she was hungry now, so she nodded vigorously. Hearing this, the young monk took out an oil paper bag from his sleeve pocket and handed it to Shen Shuwei. "I have a steamed bun here for the donor to fill his stomach." Shen Shuwei looked at the oil paper bag in front of her and immediately understood what the little monk meant. He wanted her to eat the steamed buns and let go of the rabbit. The little monk is a match for Tang monk. "But I want to eat meat." She didn't want to force herself to eat cold steamed buns. The young monk paused, then took 2 steps forward, clasped his hands together and continued, "Donor, although this is outside the temple, it can be seen that there is no bloodshed. Since ancient times, there have been many rules in temples." Shen Shuwei didn't know what to say when he heard the words. He looked down at the rabbit in his hand and said, "Okay." As soon as she let go of her hand, the rabbit landed on the ground and ran away quickly, fearing that it would run too slow and become a meal on the plate. The little monk saw him and breathed a sigh of relief. Shen Shuwei looked away. He couldn't eat roasted rabbit, so he could only eat instant noodles. "Little monk, I don't want to eat steamed buns. How about you get me some hot water?" The young monk nodded. "Donor, please come with me." Shen Shuwei followed the young monk back the same way, watched the young monk close the door, then turned around and continued walking. There is a small pavilion nearby, with lanterns hung around it, giving off a faint light. While Shen Shuwei was sitting in the pavilion waiting for the young monk, she took out a bucket of instant noodles from her arms, opened the package, and put the condiments in one by one, except for hot water. The little monk was very fast, and he came over in a short time carrying a hot water bottle. "The donor has been waiting for a long time." The little monk placed the hot water bottle on the table, and then placed a lantern on the table to make the surrounding area brighter. "You're quite fast." Shen Shuwei couldn't wait to reach for the hot water bottle, but the young monk beat her to it. She raised her head and looked at the young monk in confusion. "It's too dark here, I'd better do it." The little monk picked up the hot water bottle, opened the stopper, and poured the hot water into the bucket. He poured it very slowly for fear of pouring too much. Shen Shuwei knew that the little monk was afraid that she would burn her hands. With the help of the weak light, she watched the hot water covering the dough, and hurriedly shouted to stop. "Little monk, it's done." The little monk stopped his hand in time, capped the bottle, and put the hot water bottle aside. Shen Shuwei closed the lid neatly and pressed his heavy sleeves on it to make the instant noodles cook faster. The young monk didn't say much. He sat quietly across from him and looked at Shen Chui's actions in confusion. Shen Chu raised his eyes slightly and looked at the young monk opposite. Seeing that he was sitting properly, he asked casually, "Why do you want to become a monk?" The young monk answered concisely and to the point, "My family is gone, so the master took me in." Shen Chui stared at the young monk's bald forehead and felt it was a pity that such a handsome young man had entered Buddhism and ended the mortal world. Actually, being a monk is quite good. Apart from not being able to marry a wife, there are no worries. The young monk did not answer but asked, "Why did the donor go out alone?" "Because meat is not allowed in the temple." Shen Chui ate it secretly. Of course, he couldn't explicitly say that he sneaked out behind Xiao Jinyan's back. The young monk paused when he heard this, and showed an imperceptible smile. He reminded in a gentle voice, "The back door is slippery at night, so it is best for the donor not to go." Shen Chui knew that the young monk meant well, so she nodded, "You can't kill animals near the temple. I can't eat meat even if I go there. I won't go there again." While chatting, the instant noodles are ready. Shen Chui couldn't wait to open the lid, took a fork and started eating the hot noodles. Xiao Jinyan was reading in the side room and found that Shen Chui had not come back after going out for a long time. He put down the book in his hand, walked to the door, opened the door and asked Wei Qi at the door, "Where is Shen Liangdi?" Wei Qi was responsible for the prince's safety, and Shen Liangdi was the prince's woman. He didn't dare to look at her, even though she looked familiar. "My subordinate saw Shen Liangdi walking over there." He pointed to the bluestone path. Xiao Jinyan walked out with doubts, walked along the bluestone road, asked the guards standing guard, and found a small pavilion nearby. He looked at the two figures sitting in the pavilion. With the dim light, he recognized Shen Chui sitting there eating. Opposite Shen Chui sat a monk, and the two were talking about something. He hadn't been back for so long, so he was eating here secretly. "Doesn't that monk know that he is a monk?" Xiao Jinyan strode towards the pavilion with a gloomy face. The little monk asked, "Is the vegetarian meal not to your taste?" It was only half an hour before dinner, and Shen Chui's way of eating clearly showed that she was hungry, so the little monk asked this. Shen Chui was eating noodles and said vaguely, "Well, the vegetarian meal is too light, it almost tastes bland in my mouth, meat is so fragrant." The little monk had not eaten meat since he became a monk, and had forgotten the taste of meat. Seeing Shen Chui's greedy look, he smiled. The temple rules are like this. Once the donor leaves the temple, he can eat and drink as he pleases. "I know, just bear it and it will pass," Shen Chui said, "but in fact, bearing it is the most uncomfortable as scratching her heart and liver." "Shen Liangdi." A cold and slightly deep voice came over. The voice was too familiar, even if she didn't look, she knew it was Xiao Jinyan. She even forgot to chew, with two noodles hanging in her mouth, and looked sideways at the entrance. Under the lantern, there stood a slender figure, the pale yellow light shone on the person's beautiful face, and the eyes were slightly dark. "Is this angry?" "My dears, good evening. This is the third chapter today, and there will be more updates. Being cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets.